Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to X-Fest. Yes, I needed a little time to recuperate after subjecting myself to the travesty that is X3, The Last Stand. Well, I guess it's just X-Men, The Last Stand. Who cares? It's a big steaming pile of poop. And especially knowing that the next one I had to look forward to after that, as I am watching them in release order, was X-Men Origins, Wolverine. An interesting beast, to say the least. Why did I make that reference? Beast isn't even in it. But anyway, it's kind of interesting because fans are very split on which one is the worst of the X-Men movies. Is it X3 or is it X-Men Origins Wolverine? What do I think? Well, let's find out. And find out all the other things I thought about it, too. Today, as X-Fest finally continues on the Multimedia Chronicles. Welcome back. So, which camp do I fall into? Is X-Men Origins Wolverine the worst X-Men movie of all time? Or does that honor fall on the shoulders of X-Men The Last Stand? Well, for me personally, I would have to say The Last Stand is the worst of the two. And there go half my viewers. Well, sorry if you just lost a bunch of respect for me. It's only my opinion. Take it for what you will. Yeah, honestly, I actually find X-Men Origins Wolverine the more tolerable of the two. For a number of reasons. I mean, everybody really focuses on the negative aspects of it. And to be fair, the negative aspects of it are really negative. Are they ever? Like, I mean, there's some things that they just really got colossally, catastrophically wrong. But there's some other things that they actually do a pretty good job of. I mean, I got to give credit where credit's due. Now, the big problem with X3, of course, I had was that they, I don't know, it was characters acting out of character from what had been established before, and just, I don't know. I've done, like, 3 videos about all the things wrong with X3. Go watch those. But with X-Men Origins Wolverine, I actually honestly think there's a lot to like about it. Is it the brutal, hardcore, ultra-violent Wolverine movie we've always wanted? No, not by a long stretch. Is it a little edgier, a little darker than previous outings for the character? Yes, absolutely. We do see some sides to the character that we haven't seen before. In particular, let's just start from the beginning. The whole montage at the beginning, I mean, starting off with him as a kid and discovering his bone claws for the first time, and there's that wonderful scene where he kills the guy who he thinks is, killed his father, and it turns out that the guy he just killed to avenge his father was actually his father. Oh my God! Like, let's just start the kid's first experience with being a mutant off with some additional trauma, shall we? And that, I mean, that is the beginning of Logan's lifelong emotional torment. I mean, he goes through so much shit over the course of his life, and it just shows that, yeah, that this roller coaster ride of emotion and anguish that he's had to deal with began when he was a kid. In this case, when he first discovered his mutant abilities, and the somewhat controversial bone claws. I know a lot of fans don't like the bone claws. When I was reading the comics back in the day, the bone claws hadn't come around. They were a retcon, basically. And his adamantium claws were always just that. He got them when he got the adamantium lacing to his skeleton, and the claws were just a part of that process. They weren't coated bone claws. But, I don't know, I guess they wanted to give it a more organic... It's like the whole organic web shooters thing with Spider-Man, you know? It's like some fans don't mind, some they think it's, you know, it kind of makes sense, you know, part of the spider bite effect. But others prefer that he, you know, used his scientific knowledge to make the web shooters and such. So in the case of Wolverine, again, I think fans are kind of split on the bone claws. Honestly, I always kind of found the concept of them kind of awkward, and for the simple reason well, actually, as illustrated in the movie, when he fights Sabretooth outside the bar, and he snaps his bone claws off. Like, he just stomps on them, and they shatter. So, yeah, that's why I always felt... They just didn't seem that they would be anywhere near as tough. I mean, they look cool in artwork and whatnot, but in terms of practicality, I just didn't think that they were anywhere near as effective. I mean, the whole idea with the adamantium, of course, is it's nigh on indestructible. And with his adamantium claws, they're not only indestructible, they're also razor sharp. They do not dull. They can cut through pretty much anything. So that's a big deal. But with the bone claws, they just seemed... I don't know. They just seemed too weak for me, for Wolverine, you know? Anyway, getting back to the montage. Love the montage. I mean, first off, we for the first time in the movies, we really find out how old he actually is. I mean, he's literally over a century old. Why? Because he's got the accelerated healing ability, so it slows the aging process considerably. That was established all the way back in the first movie. So that ties into that quite nicely. And then Sabretooth, being his, what is it, like half-brother, he also has the accelerated healing. Not to the same extent that Logan does. Like, he can't, it's revealed later he wouldn't be able to undergo the adamantium lacing process because he wouldn't survive it, because his healing factor, while it is strong and formidable and has allowed him to slow the aging process as well, is not strong enough for him to be able to survive the process. So Logan is actually the stronger of the two in that respect. So I really liked the back to the montage again. I swear we'll get through the opening scene. I just keep jumping around. But anyway, I just loved the whole montage. I mean, A, because it showed us how old Wolverine really is, and it also showed how the relationship between Logan and Victor changed over the course of the various wars that they went through. Whereas Wolverine found more his... compassionate side while also being an effective soldier. Victor just became the animal. Wolverine is always a balance between the man and the animal, and that's part of the things that makes the character interesting, is you have that constant conflict between the man and the animal, try to keep the animal under control, but use its power where appropriate, but at the same time try not to lose control. Victor, on the other hand, loves to lose control. He loves to just let the animal loose, and, we see lots of examples of him killing people who aren't necessarily soldiers. They're, innocents and such, and Logan stops him sometimes, doesn't others, and we really see the contrast of the two. I mean, these are two characters with very similar dynamics in that they both have the man-animal side, but they both deal with it in very different ways. And that's something I find really interesting. And I really liked how that played out just in visual form over the course of that opening montage. I thought that was really good. And I've heard even from people who hated the rest of the movie, they said, yeah, honestly, that part was really good. That was actually really well done. And people seem to be pretty much unanimous on that aspect of it. Now, there is, regarding Sabretooth, I have to address this at some point. Might as well be now while we're kind of just touching on their characters a little bit. The characterization of Sabretooth in this is way different from how we saw him in the first movie. Now, in the first movie, honestly, his portrayal in the first movie wasn't really bang on what we've seen in the comics either. In terms of the look, the big, huge, imposing, shaggy mane Sabretooth, that's pretty much bang on perfect. Like, visually, Sabretooth looked amazing and he stepped right out of the frickin' comics. Characterization-wise, we got a little bit of his sadistic side, with wanting Storm to scream and everything, but we didn't really get the scheming, conniving side, because he was always rougher than Wolverine, but he wasn't an idiot. He was smart. He was scheming and conniving and cunning, and would sometimes concoct these elaborate scenarios to lure Wolverine out to get him, to try to get his vengeance or whatever, and or whatever bee was in his bonnet in that issue. And we didn't really see that in the first movie. We saw a little bit, but we didn't get the sense that these two characters had a history. Whereas in the comics, they have a history. So that was, you know, a hiccup that I felt that they were trying to correct with this movie. You know, they're trying to go back and say, okay, let's give the fans the real Sabretooth. And now I have heard kind of mixed opinions on the visual version of Sabretooth they went with. In Ultimate X-Men, it seems like they borrow a lot from Ultimate X-Men, actually. So I really have to read that and see what I've been missing all this time. Because I keep getting bits and pieces like, oh, that, well, why do you look like that? Oh, well, that's from Ultimate X-Men. Oh, damn it. Haven't read that yet. But apparently the version of Sabretooth that we see in Wolverine Origins, or X-Men Origins Wolverine, rather, is the Ultimate X-Men version. So he's more kind of, you know, he doesn't have the shaggy mane. He's more kind of clean cut and, you know, has the facial hair and stuff. I mean, honestly, he looks more like a vicious, almost Hitman version of Wolverine. And, you know, I mean, we've had different versions of Wolverine over the years as well, and we have more sort of clean cut, we have more sort of wild beast and stuff like that. And, yeah, but as far as Sabretooth goes, I mean, I didn't really have an issue with that. I'd never seen that version of the character before, but I found it interesting, and I love Liev Schreiber. I think he's just a fantastic actor. I've never not liked him in anything I've ever seen him in. You want a really good one to check him out in? The HBO film RKO 281, where he plays Orson Welles, and it's all about the behind-the-scenes, you know, politics of Hollywood, about the making of and controversy surrounding Citizen Kane, and he plays Orson Welles, and wonderfully. It's just such a fun movie, especially if you're familiar with the real story behind the story. It's like a dramatized version of the actual craziness that went on behind the scenes with that movie. It's wonderful, and he's wonderful in it. But I think he's just a great actor, so I kind of was able to forgive the fact that this was a Sabretooth version of Sabretooth that I was unfamiliar with, because I love the actor so much. And I think he and Hugh Jackman, who apparently are great friends in real life and have worked together, you know, on stage and such before, I thought they worked really well together and actually played off each other really well. So I really liked that aspect of it. Yeah. So, I mean, differences, I guess, well, I don't want to say differences, but I guess hiccups in continuity aside, I actually like what they did with those characters and their relationship in this. I mean, it gave them that history that we were missing in the first one, and made Sabretooth much more of a formidable force to be reckoned with. I mean, a genuinely dangerous character. I mean, you do not want to get on this guy's bad side. You know, I mean, there's that heartbreaking scene where he goes to the circus and he kills the guy with the power to control electricity. What's his face? The guy from the Hobbit, Dominic Monaghan, or can't remember his name. Anyway, you know who I mean. The guy who played Merryweather in Lord of the Rings, and he was actually an original character that they created for the movie. He's not actually from the comics, but again, wonderful actor, and he played just this such innocent, charming character who was part of this special elite mutant hit squad. But he doesn't kill anybody, and he's basically just there to control the electronics and stuff. And he was just this really sweet character. And, you know, he's kind of making his living after leaving the special forces as a circus freak, essentially. And then Sabretooth kills him because he's killing off the old team. But interesting. Now, I should talk about the Special Forces team. We got some interesting characters in there. We got, the guy who would later become the Blob, for example. And I love the fact that unless you really know that character from the comics, you don't know that that's who he's supposed to be. All you know is that this is a big, beefy guy who is apparently unstoppable. Like that wonderful thing where they're going to infiltrate the facility, and he turns to Stryker and he says, "The tank?" And he says, "The tank." So he just walks up to the tank, looks down the barrel, sees it's about to fire, shoves his fist in the barrel, and the tank just explodes, and he doesn't even move. So That's cool. I mean, I just thought, wow, what a badass character. And I've seen the actor who played him in a number of other movies as well, and have always really enjoyed his performances. But he usually plays kind of tough guys with attitude problems. So I really liked him. And then later, when he becomes the Blob and you realize who he is, I was just like, oh my god, it's the Blob. And then, like, the Blob has been a mainstay of the X-Men comics for forever. Now, I of course know the Blob from the comics and from the cartoons, but I don't know anything about his origins. Like, I don't even know if I'm sure we must have got an origin at some point, but to me, he was just a character that was always around. Like, I didn't even think of what, or even care particularly what his origin was. It didn't matter to me. I was just like, the Blob is the Blob. He's the force that cannot be moved unless he wants to be moved. And I just really liked what they did with him, where he was this big beefy special forces guy. Who would eat as his coping mechanism. Even the first scene you see him in with the team, he's like munching on stuff the whole time. And after the things that they did and the missions that they went on and such, and they all disbanded and went their separate ways, he developed an eating disorder as part of his coping. And then when when Wolverine goes to meet up with him at the boxing ring, he's trying to find out where this island is that he keeps hearing about and what that's all about. Basically trying to track down Stryker and track down Sabretooth. Actually, he's trying to stop him. And so he goes to ask him, and he says, "Listen, bub." And then the guy, he just stops and turns and he says, "Did you just call me Blob?" And I just died laughing at that part, because there's this whole build up beforehand where it's like, don't mention his weight, he's really sensitive about it. And just that, because we get Wolverine's bub line, which we've seen, it's like one of his catchphrases, basically. He always calls everybody bub, especially when he's about to kick their ass. And then he mishears it as blob, and then of course all hell breaks loose. But just hilarious. I really wish we had seen more of Blob, because I thought he was just a really fun, goofy character, as he should be, because he's a goofy character in the comics as well. He's basically just this big fat guy who's so big and fat he can't be moved. He is an immovable object that will not move unless he chooses to. And and I thought they brought him to life on the screen beautifully. And even there's some wonderful behind the scenes featurettes where they're talking to the actor playing him, and he said when he was asked if he wanted to play the Blob, he jumped at it. He was so excited. He's like, "Oh, absolutely, yeah, I'd totally play the Blob." And I mean, he's not a fat guy by any means. He's actually quite, ripped. But so they put him in just like, I think one of the biggest fat suits ever made for a film, and appropriately so. He's the Blob. So yeah, love the Blob. Wish we'd seen more of him. Who else do we got in there? Got to talk about Gambit. Yes, for a long time we've been wanting to see Gambit on screen in some form, and again, I thought that, well, his first scene in particular, where he's at the card table, and as soon as you see him playing cards, okay, they're going to do the cards thing. We got to see the cards thing. So Wolverine comes in and chats with him, and I'm not familiar with the actor who played Gambit. I know he's been in some other stuff, but I'm not overly familiar with his work. I know fans weren't overly thrilled with the choice, but whatever. I thought he was fine. I mean, Gambit was another one of those characters that I didn't really know from the comics, because he appeared kind of after I had stopped collecting. So I know he was really popular with fans of the 90s era of comics. And then I, of course, mainly know him from the animated series, in which he was one of the main characters. And I always, once I saw him in the animated series, I mean, and let's face it, the animated series is probably the single most faithful adaptation of the comics ever done, outside of, the comics. Once I saw him in the animated series and sort of saw what his thing was and stuff like that, I thought, okay, I get it. I can see why fans like this guy. He's a fun character. He's got the attitude, and he's got a pretty cool mutant ability and such. So I know Gambit was one of the characters that that fans have been wanting to see in an X-Men movie for a very long time. Side note, apparently there is a Gambit movie in the works now. They are finally doing a solo movie with Gambit. So don't know if it's actually going to happen. It's kind of in, you know, they're talking about it stage right now, but we'll see what happens. Hopefully we'll get that going. So yeah, I mean, the whole opening scene at the card table and everything, and he does the card thing. You see him, that little subtle thing where he holds up the card and you see it charging. And anybody who knows the character knows what's going on. You're like, oh shit, like Wolverine's about to get his ass kicked. He has no idea what he's dealing with here. We know, but he doesn't know. And then he does, and he throws the one card, and it, you know, sends Wolverine flying. And then he like pulls out the whole deck and does like the arc of charged cards, and it does it. It's right out of the animated series. He's like just flicking the cards out, and it's freaking awesome. But then the rest of the scenes, we see him, and he's charging his cane and doing all these acrobatic maneuvers and stuff. It's like, oh come on, I want to see more with the cards. The cards are so freaking cool. But instead, they chose to go with the cane. I mean, honestly, with Gambit, it doesn't matter. His mutant ability is that he can charge objects with kinetic energy, essentially. So he uses cards because it's just handy. You know, I mean, a deck of cards, that gives you 52 bullets, as it were, you know. So he would have several decks of cards on his person, and he can just charge it and flick it, and that's a deadly weapon. You know, so in the case of his cane, in the movie, he would charge the cane, do a flying leap off a roof, and then slam it into the ground and release all that energy into the surrounding environment, knocking everybody else off their ass. But of course, him being at the epicenter would not be knocked off his ass. So some cool ideas there. Now, that said, much like the Blob, I felt like Gambit was really underused. Now, the flip side of that is, as fun as it was to see all these characters from the X-Men universe being brought to life on the screen, I feel like because they were so underused, it was kind of like they were sort of shoehorned in just to appease the fans. And, you know, it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, yes, fun to see those characters finally, but you tried to fit so many in here and appease the fans with all these characters they've been wanting to see for so long that you didn't give any of them enough screen time. You didn't give any of them enough to do. I mean, the Blob basically gets one scene where he fights Wolverine in the boxing ring. Gambit gets his big showcase scene at the card table, and then he shows up at the end to rescue Wolverine. But, and I mean, the actor playing him, I thought he did Gambit fine, honestly. I mean, doing the Cajun accent, and because I think he had the attitude right. I mean, he had the smart alecky, you know, take no nonsense attitude of Gambit pretty much bang on. So I don't know, maybe a little lacking in the charisma department. I mean, the Gambit is a very charismatic, charming character, and I think that the actor who played him did a you know, a competent job. But maybe pick somebody else for the Gambit movie. I mean, well, I'm sure they will by this point. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. Yep, and that's it. That's all the characters they introduced for the first time on screen in this movie. So hope you enjoyed this review, and yeah. Well, and this part is pretty much where all the happiness and sunshine and roses ends. Now, honestly, in terms of balancing the good with the bad, that's a lot in favor of the good. You know, I mean, I still say I think this movie is a lot more fun than people give it credit for, because they focus on the bad aspects of it. And there's one aspect in particular that fans really focus on. And watching it again for the first time in about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, and after having seen the real, proper, good movie made with this character, yeah, I can definitely concede that this particular aspect is incredibly, incredibly wrong. And I don't know what the fuck they were thinking. So, I'm of course talking about Deadpool. Yes, or Dino. Deadpool in name only. Now, the thing that is really a kick in the teeth about the whole Deadpool situation with this movie is we get the scene at the beginning with the special, elite team, and we see Ryan Reynolds as Wade Wilson, pre-Deadpool Wade Wilson. And he is perfect. He is hilarious. He's got the right attitude. He kicks a lot of ass. I mean, he's doing the freaking helicopter figure eights with his swords and reflecting bullets all over the place and killing guys with their own bullets. And then the whole scene in the elevator where they're going up to that floor to kill everybody, and just all the little banter with him there. And but then they do the bit of foreshadowing there. It's like, don't you ever shut up. And it's like, if you didn't have that mouth on you, you'd be the perfect soldier. And I'm like, oh, God. And then, yeah. So, I mean, it shows such promise because we saw just how good Ryan Reynolds could be with the attitude of that character. And then, of course, we all know what happened. He turned into Super Deadpool with powers that Deadpool has never had in the comics, ever. And... oh my God. Okay, after watching the movie, I had to... and they sewed his mouth shut, but we already know that. You don't need me to tell you all the things that are wrong with how they portrayed Deadpool in this movie. So after watching the movie, I was like, I have to watch the extras. Like, I have to watch the extras and see what they were thinking. So they have... the Mutant Files on there, which is basically featurettes spotlighting each of the major mutants in the movie, and for the most part, they're a lot of fun. I mean, they're really cool. I mean, the actors playing them, really enjoy these characters and have a lot of fun with them. People are saying, like, God, Hugh Jackman must be so sick of Wolverine, but he has said in countless interviews he loves this character and really enjoys playing him, and bless him for it, because I think he's awesome. He'll always be the well, until somebody comes along and changes my mind. I mean, I'll always think of him as the definitive on-screen Wolverine. I mean, he did what nobody thought could be done and brought that character to life, And so I watched the featurettes about the different mutants, and they were a lot of fun, a lot of interesting. I love the one about the Blob was hilarious. The guy who played the character is just so enthusiastic and full of energy and fun, and it's really infectious as you're watching the behind-the-scenes stuff there. Lots of interviews with Hugh Jackman and Liev Schreiber. I have no idea how his last name is. I know his first name is Liev, anyway. So lots of interviews with Hugh and Liev, talking about their respective characters and sort of what they were doing in terms of playing off each other and stuff. And that's a lot of fun to see, because, I mean, let's face it, I mean, they're two fantastic actors, and it's great to see them together. The one about Gambit, and the actor who played him wasn't really overly familiar with the character from the comics, but did his homework and researched the character. And as I say, I think he did a decent job. I really have no complaints about how Gambit was portrayed in the movie, other than the lack of screen time. And then we get to the Deadpool one. And I knew we were in trouble when about 75% of the Deadpool featurette is about the Wade Wilson scene. Because everybody knows the Wade Wilson scene was awesome. And they really nailed it. They totally nailed it in that scene. And if you had come in at that point and then stopped the movie 20 minutes before the end, you'd be like, oh, I gotta watch the end of this sometime, but I'm just gonna bask in how awesome it's been so far, and I can't wait to see how amazing the ending is gonna be. Yeah, no. But, so they get to the part where they're talking about Deadpool, and they say, well, we can't, and we got the producer, Laura Schuler Donner, and one of the effects guys, and they're talking about it, and the director, and they're talking about their reasoning for doing Deadpool differently in the movie, and they're like, okay, we know we didn't have him in his trademark red and black costume, but it's okay. We're aware. We know that there was a reason for that, and the reason being he was taken out of the the process before he was finished, so he didn't have his costume yet. And they don't even talk about the whole sewing his mouth shut thing, really. I think they gloss over it briefly, and And what's funny is, in all the previous parts of that featurette where they're talking about the Wade Wilson scene, they're talking about him being the Merc with the mouth. The Merc with the mouth! So why'd you show his mouth shut? So we get to, they're talking about it, and they're talking about the fact that he has all these powers. Oh, yeah, we know he doesn't have all those powers in the comics, but, we just thought we'd throw him in there, and we hope we surprised you a little bit. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you surprised us, all right. Yeah, I'd say surprise would certainly be a word for it. And then they talk about the costume a little bit more, and they say, "Oh yeah, we know he's supposed to have the diamonds around his eyes, and you notice when he's like charging up his eye laser power, it kind of burns in the black there. So it's like just to say to the audience, oh yeah, we know, but this is the beginning. You'll see the real thing later." Yeah, which we did, and which thankfully was a massive retcon that erased that version of Deadpool from history. So overall, as you may gather, I actually really enjoy this movie. Oh, this is the wonderful scene with the old couple after Wolverine escapes the Weapon X project. Just a nice little heartwarming scene where he's being taken in by this nice old couple, and then their fate is a horrible and tragic one. And you feel bad for them. They were really sweet and nice and helping him out. And the whole Weapon X scene. I mean, they talk about the Weapon X scene and how the layout of the Weapon X tank and the room that the whole experiment takes place in, and the needles and everything, just the whole design of it is different from what we've seen before, specifically back in X2, where Wolverine found the Weapon X facility and where he was created. And the main reason they said they did that, and I can kind of roll with this, is because they wanted to open it up more to have a bigger kind of focus in that room to really show the process and show everything. I don't know. I mean, I guess they could have kept it the same, but they didn't. But I mean, I think their reasons for it were fairly sound in terms of just wanting to open it up more to give more room to do stuff, essentially. And to really get into detail with the process, which in X2 and even a little bit in X1, we really just saw flashes and brief glimpses of the process. We didn't really get any detail. It was all flashback and memory fragments. Whereas in this one, we actually see it as it's happening and get a lot more detail there. So that's fine. I didn't really have an issue with that. Honestly, I mean, really, my main issues with the movie were lack of screen time for the mutants we hadn't seen before, and as such, I kind of almost wonder what's the point. Like, why even bother putting them in if you're not going to give them anything to do? Just keep the focus more on Logan and Victor, and their conflict and what they're dealing with, and then of course just how they completely royally fucked up Deadpool. Like, I honestly don't know. I mean, they attempt to butter up the viewer and gloss it over as much as they can and explain it away in the featurette, but I'm just not buying it. If you have this Blu-ray, watch that featurette and you'll see what I'm talking about. Like, they're just backpedaling so hard in that featurette. Like, they totally know they fucked up and that everybody hated it. And and they're trying so hard, so desperately to cover their asses. Yeah, I've not listened to. There like two. I think there's like 2 commentary tracks on this. Yeah, there's two commentary tracks. One by director Gavin Hood, and one by producers Laura Schuler-Donner and Ralph Winter. Laura Schuler-Donner is probably the most apologetic throughout. And actually, interestingly enough, interesting side note, in the featurette just about the Wolverine, the idea of doing a Wolverine movie in general, they talk about how what they wanted to do originally was the Wolverine Goes to Japan story. So they were talking about it back here. But instead they thought, well, let's do the origin story first to give him that background and finally reveal his origin. And then we'll do the Japan story next time. And they did. And all I can say is thank God that that by the time they did that second Wolverine movie, it was after Tom Rothman had left. You can really feel the lack of fingers in the pie when you get to the next movie after this, namely X-Men First Class. But we will talk about that next time. So that pretty much wraps up my thoughts on X-Men Origins Wolverine. I don't think it's as big a disaster as people make it out to be. Honestly, I think people are misremembering it. They're putting a little bit too much weight on the negative and not seeing it for the positive. But that said, the negative is pretty negative. Yeah, like I'm with it. I'm with it right up until Super Deadpool appears. And I'm just like, what were they thinking? Yeah. Anyway, we're past the bad. Now we're getting into the good and the great. But that'll be next time with X-Men First Class. Alrighty. So, quick thank you to my Patreon sponsors. Thanks, Patreon sponsors, especially Get Your Gorgeous On and Kyle Pellegrini, my 2 highest level sponsors. And I will talk to you next time. Until then, thanks for watching, and sayonara.